Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the administrator of the Howard County Office on Aging. You know, being called the director of the Department on Aging is really more of a promotion, and I'm not quite ready for that. But I do want to first thank the Howard County Citizens Association, the League of Women Voters, and the Coordinating Center for sponsoring this event and for inviting me to speak. I know I don't have a whole lot of time, and what I'm going to do is really talk about the demographics of the county. One thing I think we all realize that every single one of us has in common is that we are aging. So I'm going to let 10 seconds go by. Well, okay, less than 10 seconds, but you all got older. And in other regards, what I like to call it is also job security. Another thing that we all know is that the entire world is aging. It's not just Howard County, but the aging population is really the fastest growing segments of populations around the world. All around the country, pretty much in every state, in every city, in every county, in every town. So it really has a lot of implications for each and every one of us. I'm going to point out some of the highlights, sort of general highlights, and then we're going to sort of look more, closely at Howard County. By 2030, more than 70 million Americans, which is twice the number it was in 2000, will be 65 or older. And already right now, 20% of the U.S. population is 65 or older. Now, right now, Howard County has one of the smallest percentages of older residents, about 10%, where Talbot and Worcester counties have the highest at like 23, 24%. Statewide, the older population is at 12%. But right now, Howard County is poised to be one of the most rapidly aging populations, and by 2020, 15% of the county is going to be over 65, and by 2030, that'll be 20%. There was an article in the Washington, oh, don't go yet. That's okay. There was an article in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago about a report that AARP recently published called The Aging of the Baby Boom and the Growing Care Gap. And what that report speaks to, I haven't seen it yet, but what that report speaks to is that the fact that the aging population is growing so fast is that the caregivers who are going to be there to take care of all of us, they're not catching up. So right now, the ratio of, people that are caregivers is going to really drop below a 3-to-1 ratio. I know that I'm guessing that a lot of, just by looking around the room, I'm not judging or anything, but I'm going to assume that a lot of people in the room are baby boomers. Those of us born between 1946 and 1964. If you're a baby boomer like me, raise your hand. So it's pretty much most of the room. And we're the ones who are, it's our population that are all turning 65 pretty much every minute of every day. And going back to the issue about caregivers, so in 20 years from now, because there are going to be so fewer caregivers available to take care of all of us, it is going to have huge implications, both at the policy level, at the service level, and it's also going to have an implication in terms of creating opportunities for other ways of us taking care of each other, which I know Mary McGraw is going to speak to later when she talks about the village. And it's also, there is a federal commission that is currently looking at long-term planning and is planning on, sending out a set of recommendations in the fall. But I also want to let you know that here in Howard County, we are also poised to be looking at putting a master plan together, not just about what our senior centers are going to look like in 20 years, but what we are going to need to look like in the next 20 years in terms of how we meet the needs of a very growing, diverse, aging population. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to go. So I'm gonna go fairly quickly through the demographics because, like I said, I know I don't have a lot of time. But this first graph, and hopefully these are easy enough for people to see, shows the residential growth of Howard County starting back in 1860 when there were only about 13,000 people in the county. And I'm assuming that none of you were here then. But by 2040, the population of the county is pretty much going to start leveling off at about 350,000. And as Stu had pointed out, we're at about 290,000 now. And also by 2040, between 2010 and 2040, so over the next, close to 30 years, the residents who are 65 and older are going to account for 165% of that increase, which is huge. And, the heaviest of that growth is going to happen in actually the next 7 years. So up until 2020, excuse me. And by 2040, the fastest growing age group will actually be those who are 80 and older. So over the next 30 years, what you're actually going to see is a decline and a stagnation in residents who are between the ages of 5 and 19. And close behind that, those between 40 and 64 are not going to have as big a growth either. They are going to see a 2% increase in growth over the next 30 years. And again, as I said, the largest increase is going to come from those 65 and older. Now these next few slides we're actually going to look at a progression of the aging population over the next 30 years. So this first slide is 2010. So where you can see on that top box, those are where the baby boomers are. And that's where we are in 2010. We made up those pieces of the population. The echo boomers are the ones who are not far behind us. And echo boomers, by definition, are technically the children of the baby boomers. So they're really that next generation. By 2020, what you'll see is an expansion of this population pyramid, where it's starting to get top-heavy, which means all of the older people are making up most of the county's population. And again, the echo boomers, those coming behind us, are not that far behind. Then by 2030, it's even more so. And if you look, all of the baby boomers will be in that 65 or older age bracket. I'll be 65 by then. Oh goodness, I'll be 65 by then. But again, you can see that the majority of the growth in the population of the county are those people who are the older population. And then by 2040, what you start to see is that the population at the top is thinning out a little bit, and that's because we're all dying off by then. But if you look at where the echo boomers are, they're already starting to turn 65. So none of this is going to stop anytime soon. Now, one thing that this doesn't take into account is migration. So that this assumes that we're all staying in Howard County. It doesn't necessarily take into account some of us who may leave the county or other people who may come into the county. There may be more families with younger children that come into the county. But again, these are all assumptions that don't assume that that's going to be the place, because we all want to age in place. So again, to just sort of reiterate what I was talking about earlier, you'll see that all of the growth is really in that 65 and older population, and that's where those big chunks of growth are going to be happening. This is just another slide that kind of points to what that growth is going to look like over a 30-year span. And again, like I mentioned before, because people are living longer, we are going to be the fastest growing part of the population. I keep saying we. And again, the whole thing about people who are 80 and older. Oh, 1 minute, oh goodness. Okay, the next slide just kind of, very quickly, just kind of looks at where baby boomers live currently in the county, which as you can see, one dot represents 50 people, whereas you can see, we're all pretty much living in that I-95 corridor. The next slide shows that where people 65 and older are currently living, and again, it's pretty much the same, where one dot represents 30 people. The next few slides really talk about kind of the race, in terms of race, in terms of the county. And right now, where we were in 2000, and this is where we were in 2010. And as you can see, a huge majority of the county is white, or excuse me, Caucasian. And then if you go forward, next slide. What you'll see is that, so again, in 2010, what you'll see is that, again, the majority or white alone population is pretty much the majority in every age cohort. But then if you go to 2020, the minority population overall in the county will actually be about half of the county for all of the age cohorts, with pretty much the exception of those 50 and older. Time is up. There are a few more slides, but again, so just to point out, we're getting older, and there is a lot of things that we're going to have to keep in mind in terms of how we prepare for that. And I'll be here for the entire thing, so I'd be happy to take questions if there are any later. And I don't know if the slides are going to be available to people later on. Okay, they will be. So sorry that I didn't get through the whole thing, but I'll hand it on to who's ever next. Is that Phyllis?